You're listening to the Edible Valley Podcast, episode 214.
On this episode, number 3 of the Chef series, The History of Restaurants. Do you ever wonder where your food comes from? That's what got us started on this adventure.
In each episode, we ask experts to weigh in on the food topics that matter to you, from growers to producers to chefs.
And I challenge John, Darren and you to learn more about your food and the stories behind it. From our hub on Vancouver Island in the beautiful Comox Valley, join us as we explore our edible valley. And a very good day to you. This is the Edible Valley Podcast. As Darren said, it's episode 214, and this is a Chef's Series episode. It's just basically being crashed by me, definitely being crashed. Darren, I think, is crashing it, but it is his house. But we're going to learn stuff about restaurants today, which I'm really excited about.
That's right. Well, this was my little series that I've been working on, and I have a lineup of guests that I'm going to bring in over the time, and I've kind of got busy.
Would you like me as a guest? I am available at short notice.
Favorite guest. Well, I always want to bring Will in because he just entertains me in so many ways.
Thank you muchly.
Yes.
So you said about restaurants and kind of the history of restaurants. I sort of assumed they'd always been around in some form or other. And so you've already just opened my mind up.
Well, in a sense, yes, restaurants and feeding establishments have been around for years and years and years. But what we know of restaurants today have really only been around for about 200 years, if you think about it.
Wow.
And it's sort of a very interesting dynamic of how it is that we've, the modern idea of what a kitchen is. I mean, because like a kitchen, restaurant translates into restorative and restoring. So it's a place that you're going to go to restore your energy. It was built as a healthy place to go to. And then it's and we've always kept evolving it into something new. Prior to that, it was more of just like, it was a lot of inns and small places. So yes, it was a public place, but it wasn't as established.
Right. Well, when it was an inn, it was more attached to the idea that you were going in for lodging. And by the way, this is the meal today.
Yeah.
It wasn't like...
And so restaurants, we're going back to, all of through human history, like back to the Greeks, the Egyptians, right? Like some of the first public eating places have been known from 512 BC.
Whoa!
In ancient Egypt, which they served a dish of plated cereal, wild fowl, and onions. Right, like that was what was coming out of those. And then it's sort of, as we established, like we got more, like the Romans had a bunch of establishments and eateries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was watching a show about the history of Rome, and I was so surprised to see that in ancient Roman times, predating like restaurants, there was essentially their version of fast food, which kind of more like a deli, but
well, sort I would almost name it like street food, right? Like what we do nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Like you have these little stalls of places you can go into, and they have a couple dishes, and it's very, very, very awesome, right? Like, I love that kind of food, and it's something that was all over the world, right? Like it wasn't just in, Egypt, like China and stuff like that had a whole bunch of different sort of food catering establishments and tea houses and stuff like that. Right. But they were more of taverns where people came to them to enjoy the foods. And so it wasn't until the more modern times that we get up to that the restaurants really started to evolve. And I think Darren's got a beautiful timeline that I...
Yeah. I want to you've got a very comprehensive timeline here, but I sort of wanted to pick out a couple and talk about them. The standout ones. So really, let's skip forward to a couple in here. It says you've got it here that January 1st, 1765, the world's first restaurant, and so it differentiates itself from the others as being what we define a restaurant as nowadays. Yeah, in that. Up until then, it was one item, one specific thing, or whatever. It wasn't really based around the dining.
The modern day restaurant.
That's right. So this became more about options, foods that people were going to enjoy specifically. It wasn't there as a, well, here's get some food in your belly. It was, this is an experience.
And the other thing I'd like to say is that a lot of chefs and cooks at that time weren't in restaurants because they were in private aristocrats' houses cooking there.
Yeah.
Like that was the sort of the progression. If you were a chef, you would go and do your apprenticeship and work in these great mansions and houses. And it wasn't until
Boulanger, they don't actually know his first name, but Mr. Boulanger or Monsieur Boulanger, he created this restaurant that he called a restaurant for its restorative properties, and it really was just a soup shop. It had bone broths and bouillons and that sort of ilk, but the idea was that you would restore, but there was a dining element to it, right?
And that was 1765.
Yeah, that was 1765.
Well, yeah, I wonder if it was seen then. You mentioned, John, the aristocrats. I wonder if it was seen as the ability for people that were normal middle class people, and I'm assuming this was for people that had some level of disposable income, if it was seen as their ability to kind of get in on the act at a lower price point. I mean, probably. I'm not sure if there's any way we could really know.
I don't know
that kind of thing.
I don't know, but I mean, you can't really. Who can say how it was taken at that time? But then you have like literally next door. Next to Boulanger was, I can't even say this, and I'm somebody that doesn't have problems with French. Le Grand Taverne Le Londres Fondid. And this
I didn't mean to laugh.
Yeah.
I'm cruel.
So I think this is where you're seeing the genesis of it. Is you have one of the royal chefs left and started up this. I guess seeing what Boulanger was doing. And it's like, whoa, there's maybe a market for this, or there's an audience for this.
This is also, you have to think about, is in the same time as the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Right? So that mindset is starting to change of the aristocrats are not the...
I think this is where it really takes off, because this is when he goes with the mindset of bringing wealthy food to the masses. Right? So now people are, much like you were saying, this is about letting them experience that and taste it and what have you.
And I imagine it would have been as a way of wanting to aspire to be more. And then at that time in France, when they were in the business of abolishing the monarchy, that it was kind of seen as you can be anything and do anything because they're going to have a president.
Yeah, right.
And the president,
exactly. This is a great equalizing time. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this was happening before the revolution, but it was all
it was
building.
the leading up to it.
Yeah, that was the environment that idea thrived.
Yeah.
So then we get to the French Revolution, and exactly that. Like, that was all about breaking down the classes, and that's where restaurants really took off. Not only that, all of a sudden there was a plethora of available private chefs no longer employed. Because everything was sort of crumbling down, and they needed to do something, right? So then you get this proliferation of restaurants. But I mean, we can go. There's. I don't know how much we want to go into all of that.
I would love to get into the real. I want to talk about the Godfather.
Oh, okay.
Let's say the Godfather of kitchens. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Oh, Escoffier.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean Escoffier. So after that, I mean, skip forward a little while. Skip forward about 100 years. You've now got established restaurants, but there's
you've got established restaurants in the United States.
That's right. Yeah,
got their first restaurants going.
Yeah, but it's not really seen in the same sort of echelons that we see now. It's not really seen as the high cuisine, high whatever. There's a lot of variation, a lot of people winging it, using their own tricks and trades that were passed down and then Escoffier comes along and says, I'm going to sort of set the bar. I'm going to write the book. I'm going to be the one that establishes the way things should be done. And then from there on,
he came from a military background.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever, like I remember at the pandemic, all the restaurants were closed for a while. So when they reopened, everyone was out of practice, and it was it was not a very organized service
Yeah.
anywhere because everyone was relearning it. Can you imagine what a show the first ever restaurant would have been
Right?
on their opening night? I mean,
Yeah.
there's just no procedures.
Well, I think it
Wow.
was probably like that for a while.
Yeah.
You probably had multiple, like every time a restaurant opened, it was like, yeah, you were taking such a risk or a gamble because.
Well, and they didn't. Here's the structure wasn't there. So when you went
Mm-hmm.
into an establishment, you ordered something. Depending on how you ordered it or what you ordered, that there was one chef working on there, and he worked on one thing at a time. So having food come up together was not a thing, right? Like it was like, oh, I ordered a pot pie and a salad. Well, a salad goes up, and then
minutes later or whatever.
yeah. Anyways, so you're trying to establish those things. So what Escavier did is he came in and he structured it. So he had a military background. So he's like, okay, so I'm going to make a brigade, and we're all going to have a task, and we're going to work on those things. So that's something we're going to work on a little bit on another series is about these
The brigade system.
the brigade
Yeah.
system.
Which is so integral to this day.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that was the first from the modern day restaurants.
He was the one who wrote it down, and he said,
Wow.
we're going to structure it. Everyone's going to have a task. You're going to work on the grill. You're going to be the rôtisseur.
Yeah.
You're going to be the garden manger.
And even, fast food like McDonald's are famous for having that
Right.
system.
That's right.
The speedy
they're
service
they're
system.
on my list of other changes to restaurants because they modernized it and they made amazing steps to structuring how a restaurant, reducing the amount of steps it takes to put a dish up. Like those time is money, and that's what kitchens are all about.
Yeah,
And so that was our first step, and that's why he's a godfather, because he created the standard. And he said, "This is how we're gonna structure our kitchen."
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, everyone knows their role when they're in the kitchen. So.
Yeah. And I don't think that we're going to hurt or hinder or aid McDonald's ability to reach their market by saying this, but I think that regardless what you think of their food, they took that brigade system to heart. Like they've excelled at it. They've turned it into, I mean, the quality of food notwithstanding, their ability to put that together in the fewest amount of steps and what have you, amazing.
And it tastes the same.
Yeah,
No
and
matter
that's the
where
other
you
thing
are.
too is that consistency, right? You need that. That was one of the whole things. And then I mean, there's some beautiful highlights here of other more modern restaurants. I do like the idea that this sort of references the French Laundry as being the one that legitimized everything. Like up until then. The American audience maybe didn't really accept all of this, and it wasn't until the French Laundry came along, which is a very famous restaurant from starting back in the 70s.
Yes.
That all of a sudden that's when it became French cuisine was they're the forerunners of cuisine.
Right.
So this is where it all comes from, and they've definitely figured it out a lot earlier than we ever did. But of course they did. I mean, they existed as a country well before the Americans did. And again, there's other highlights here of great restaurants. You've made some wonderful notes here, John. But really, I mean, I think that brings us up to speed, or does it?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of changes too. You have to look at restaurants that went from the going from doing the I'm going to mispronounce this. This is horrible. The tablet hotel menu. So like a preset, this is what's on the plate, that's it, to
Right.
going to more of a la carte.
Oh, yes.
That's
A la
what
carte.
I'm looking at. So like everything's individual. So you can, I want a steak, I want potatoes, I want
Right.
broccoli, right? So those are the changings up of the menus, and it's really neat to see the evolution of how restaurants and how they are still progressing. That we keep changing things, and we keep bringing in different aspects into restaurants, which is always bringing a different way of enjoying food while providing the best quality food with the best amount of profit and the most amount of labor, less amount of labor. Like it's all depending on. I think right now we're at kind of a heyday of restaurants. Because
Or the end of a heyday, potentially.
Maybe,
Possibly.
yeah. Just because you look at things like, I look at a lot of these restaurants, the fine dining restaurants are something that don't exist anymore.
It's true.
And if you look at most restaurants out there, they are casual fine dining because you don't make food at tables anymore. No one does that. There used to be the old drive out to the tossed Caesar salad and having
I
those
laugh
higher levels.
because my first serving positions in the industry were doing that. Like I used to work at a place called Gourmet by the Sea.
Yeah.
And Gourmet by the Sea, we had a lot of table service. So at 19, being the youngest server they ever had, being shown how to do all these things. And even then, I knew at that time, I was like, the days are numbered for this.
Right.
This service is no longer
wearing a tie.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. And my tie was inspected every night before my shift started. Oh yeah. But yeah, same thing. And yeah, so table service is going. I think that's the thing is that if I don't consider myself very old, but I've obviously been in the industry for quite a while enough to see trends come and go, and I would say that that's part of what a restaurant is, or what defines a restaurant is that trends come and go. They're going to be defined by different trends every few years. We're going to be trying new things, and those become trendy, and then other things go to the wayside.
Arguably, and this is coming at it from a relatively uneducated point of view here, but if you look down to the US, for example, you see certain restaurant chains have got thousands of locations, and they've really mastered this art of knocking the food out cheap and getting the people through the door from every level, from food that can be made with very little skill in the kitchen, so they don't have to skill up everyone in the kitchen, lowers their expenses, but getting people in and out in 30 minutes. Look at companies like Cracker Barrel, who have really nice food, and you enjoy it, and you feel like you're in the countryside, but you're out. How the heck did they get me out there in 19 minutes? Which I think is in the area their target. But certain companies now, actually not any of the ones I mentioned, are struggling, and you could say that is a good sign that even the fast casual restaurants are struggling now, and we may be seeing the back end of the heyday of restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that will ever know. I don't think you'll ever see a day when there aren't restaurants anymore. But the definition of what they are and what they're doing and what they're providing, that's always going to be changing, I think.
Yeah, we'll always be making food for others, because that's how we connect, right?
Yeah,
it's like sharing food with each other. So, and making a business model out of it that you make a little profit out of it is
right. And we've
nice
seen firsthand that doesn't matter literally what the world throws at you. There are people that don't want to cook. They just don't. They want somebody else to cook for them, and that's fine. That's where we live.
That'll always happen.
Yeah.
And we need those people to do other things that I like to cook, so I'm going to do that, so they can do the other things that I don't want to do. So
exactly.
That's how we survive as a civilization. So it's neat to look back at the history, that we've had how long we've been doing this, but yet the whole restaurant idea of what we are working with right now hasn't been around that long, which is quite interesting to me, considering how much time and energy I've put into doing this industry. And then it's very interesting to see that that's going to change too over the next few years. Like if you look at the list of these restaurants on this list here, it's neat how they've progressed. Like we've had started off with soups and stocks to all of a sudden 15 course meals, right?
Right.
It's pretty amazing to think how we've changed and how we've made it into an event.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I like I say, my biggest thing that I see is it's going to change again. You're right. We're at the end of something. Nobody can put their finger on it yet because we don't know what else is coming.
The pandemic will be seen as something that really shifted that along.
Yeah, it was an instigator for sure. We just don't know where that falls yet.
No, absolutely not. So, that was episode 214.
And episode 3 of my chef series.
And John's chef series. So really interesting.
And so my next episode, we're going to look at where to work.
Oh yeah.
I have one of my cooks coming in to sit down and talk with me who's worked everywhere.
That is exciting. That's going to be really good.
And then you're going to touch on the brigade system.
And then after that, I've got another one of my new to the industry, a very young one, who's going to come in and we're going to talk about the brigade system.
Cool.
And be like, what are these positions? So I'm going to apologize now for my bad French when it comes to that. I mean,
they all have French names.
Stumbling through.
Chef de partie.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to stumble through a bunch of them. And it's one of those things that it's a brigade system is very French.
Yeah.
So all the terms are French, but there is always a modern term for it that's more
right
with what I do. But I work in a French restaurant, so I am going to use the French term. So
I look forward to listening to those ones. I'm happy to hear where they go.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the Edible Valley.
My name is William. I'm the producer.
I'm Chef Jonathan Fraser.
And I'm Darren Howlett, overwhelmed by the amount of French.
And that wraps up another episode of the Edible Valley podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and a special thanks goes to the local businesses that help support our podcast. They make it possible for us to showcase your local food community. We'd love you to follow us on your preferred social media at Edible Valley, where you can check out our blog, find recipes and tips, behind the scenes, and of course keep a lookout for where we are going to turn up next in your Edible Valley.
What's on the plate? That's it. To
Right.
Going to more of a lunch. Sorry, this is my brain just melting down. I guess we did too many episodes in a row.
The cat's out the bag.
A la carte.
Oh, yes.
That's what I'm looking at. So like everything's. And this has been an Edible Valley production.
Yeah. Beep, 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 beep. Okay. Ready again?